everyone, and welcome to today's Conference Tracker Tech Tuesday, setting up your sessions. So as usual, today's presenters are going to be myself, Chad Blodgett. I'm the Business Development Manager here at Engineerica Systems, and also Garrett Effers, who you probably have worked with if you've used Conference Tracker before, who is one of our software support representatives. Now, if this is your first time joining us, just know that we do this every third Tuesday at 1 Eastern. We pick a new topic to kind of share our expertise with you and give you the opportunity to ask any questions. Just to kind of give you an idea of how this typically works, we go over usually some Conference Tracker announcements if we have any first. Then we get into our tech talk, and at the very end, we're going to have a live Q&A session. So if you do have any questions, we will address them at the end. Now we're going to get into the actual Tech Tuesday. So I'm going to go over a quick PowerPoint just to kind of go over the various topics of setting up your session. And then we're going to hand it over to Garrett, who's going to go through the software with you and walk you through that process. So for those who might be new to Conference Tracker, there's actually two ways of creating sessions in the software. One would be to manually enter the session information into the back end of Conference Tracker. And probably the most popular option is to run a CSV Excel file import of your session information. Now that session information will include things like session title, description, start time, end time, which room is that session going to happen, who's the presenter, what track is it a part of, so we can actually import a bunch of information about that session through a CSV file. You also have the ability, since we're talking about manual, to go into a session and edit the session information at any time as well. Your sessions can actually be, an in-person or on-site session, a virtual session, or hybrid. So you do have the ability to create the sessions, and if they are virtual or hybrid, you have a few streaming options. You can actually stream live those sessions, or you can upload a recording of those sessions for attendees to watch later. So if you have a hybrid or virtual conference, we're going to be able to again stream or upload a pre-recorded video for those sessions for attendees to watch at home, typically through our attendee app or through the attendee portal. Now, even some conferences, what they do is they will actually do a live stream for their session. If it's going to be like a hybrid session, they'll have it streaming live for attendees at home. But then you can also get the recording and upload the recording later for those who couldn't watch it live. So you can actually do both live and pre-recorded and still track your attendees who viewed that virtual session. Now, something that's pretty popular, again, are session tracks. So now you can group your sessions by category or by a target audience. And these can be color-coded to make it easier for attendees to find the sessions that they're looking for. So if you're a large conference, have lots of sessions, you can categorize them using the session tracks. Within the attendee app and the attendee portal, attendees will be able to, instead of just searching through all of your sessions, they can filter by date, they can filter by presenter, but they also can filter by various tracks. You also are able to do your session registration. So not only do we offer an attendee and exhibitor registration form that you can build out in the Conference Tracker, but you can enable what we call session registration. So as the attendee is going through the registration form, you can ask them, hey, which sessions do you plan to go to? And this does a number of things for the attendee. One is you could charge an additional fee for certain sessions that they plan to go to. This could be a lunch, a dinner, an excursion, or it could just be a session that you want attendees to have to pay for. I've seen some conferences where it might be free for attendees to go to the conference, but if you want CEUs, you have to register to the CEU sessions, which incur a fee. So that's just one example. This also allows you to set the capacity for the like an attendee limit. So as attendees are registering to the sessions, once it becomes full, the attendees can no longer register to that specific session. And probably how most of our conferences would use this is it would allow you to exclude non-registered attendees. So we could say, well, if they register to the session, allow them to come in, but if they haven't, it won't allow them to sign into the session. So again, if you're taking attendance to your session, scanning attendees' badges, it'll let you know when you scan the attendee's badge if they attended, or sorry, if they registered to that session. Now, again, a lot of conferences will do this for like lunches and dinners and maybe, extracurricular activities that may have been an additional fee, so that when you scan them, you can say, oh yes, they purchased a meal ticket or a drink ticket, or they purchased, this excursion and are allowed to come. This also will show up as the attendees' registered sessions within their attendee app and their attendee portal as well. Now we're getting into some of the session requirements. Very popular for our continuing education conferences, professional development events, where you can determine how would the attendee get credit for that session. So some of the more common ones would be, well, we require the attendee to sign in. We also require them to sign out, so we know not only when the attendee got there, when they left, but also total time the attendee was in that session. You also can have a required presence in percentage. So I could say, well, the attendee needs to be there for 90% of the session to get the 3 credits for that session. Or you can do by minutes instead. I can say 50 minutes of the 60-minute session. And something that's actually been really popular as well is we can say, well, the attendee has to complete the session evaluation for that session to actually get credit for attending. And the one that's been used more for our virtual events and hybrid events is the passing of a quiz. When COVID hit and everyone went virtual, we added the virtual options in Conference Tracker so you could stream and attendees could watch at home. But you wanted a way that you could verify they actually paid attention to the session. So we created a couple of options. One, there's a "Are you still there?" dialogue that would pop up and make sure that the attendee, they'd have to click it to continue to watch the session. So we make sure that they were still there. But also we added the passing of a quiz, so you can create a quiz that attendees have to answer and have the correct answers, and you can determine what percentage they have to get to actually pass the quiz. And you can even allow them to retake it multiple times if you want to. So I'm actually going to hand it off to Garrett, who's going to go more in depth, but into the Conference Tracker system.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Chad. So yes, today's session topic is setting up our sessions, right? So the sessions themselves are located under Conference Sessions. And like Chad told you, there's 2 options here on how you're creating your sessions. You can hit this blue Create button and you can do it manually. Or what I highly recommend, of course, is to just import your sessions using a CSV document. Makes it a lot quicker. So we do have a nice little quick button here that will take you right to your import screen. It'll even pre-select sessions as your import document here. And this is typically how you would go about loading your sessions into the system. But for today's webinar, we're going to go ahead and create one manually, right? So we're going to hit the blue Create button here. And all that's required by the system as far as minimum requirements is a name, a start time, and end time in a room. There is a default room built into the system if you don't want to create rooms, or if this is just going to be a very simple event for you. What's important here is that your session names are different. They are unique. So if you're going to track things like meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, it's important that we separate those and make them different in some way. So I like to recommend, breakfast day 1, breakfast day 2, that kind of thing. And as you scroll down here in your manual creation, right, we've got your fee and capacity, just in case you do happen to have a room limit or you're charging for your sessions. What's also important here is this power toggle. You're available for online registration. When you're allowing your attendees to come through registration and sign up for the sessions that they choose, you have this power toggle to restrict which sessions are available for registration and which aren't. For example, no one's really needing to register for a breakfast or lunch session. Most people want to eat. So scrolling down here, we have the attendance and credits box. This is going to control what you're awarding them upon successful completion. This can go from decimals to a couple dozen, so it really depends on how you're going to represent what your attendees are earning for each session. As well, we have our sign out requirement. Are we requiring them to sign out for it to be a valid attendance log, or are we just interested in the sign-ins? And then of course, like Chad was talking about, your session requirements. So are we requiring anything? And then do we want to do it by percentage or minutes? Now the defaults here, as you are seeing, is 3/4, right? 75, 45. Typically an hour is about the average of a session during an event. So the 45 is most common, but of course sometimes percentage works better. Now, if we're not going to require much, this can be anything. So like you saw in Chad's PowerPoint, we can set this to just 1%. As long as they came in, they spent a couple minutes, it's a valid attendance log. And then we get into assigning our presenters. Now, this does require that you have your presenters set up in the system first. And then once you have one, you can click in the box and click or search for the presenter there. As well, we're going to be marking the attendance mode. Is this on-site? Is this strictly virtual? Or is this both? Are we allowing both on-site and virtual attendees to sign in? This is typically what you would select if you're streaming live. And since we have select online and mixed, right, this opens up our streaming settings. So if you have that information when you're setting up your sessions, you can put it in now, but we can also wait until we get closer to the conference dates, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But here with your streaming service settings, we have two options built in. Do we want to see it within Conference Tracker, or do we want to do it through a third party? So if you're using a Zoom link, maybe you're doing like breakout rooms, things like that, you would enter your streaming snippet, your setup snippet, your code here, your URL, depending on what servicer you're using. As well, you get to control your aspect ratio. So how big or small do you want the video? What size of the screen do you want to take up? And then we get to the fun settings here that I am very proud of. These are really nice. So we get into whether or not you want to end the streaming at the session's end time. This is going to kick all of the attendees at the end of the session. So if your session's from 5 to 6 and they joined at 5:30, at 6 o'clock, whether they finish the session or not, they're going to be kicked. Now then we have our on-demand mode. This is going to allow it to still go live, of course, at the start time, but it's going to allow them to view it after the end time. So going back to that 5 to 6 o'clock example we set earlier, if they log in after 6 o'clock, they can still watch this session streaming. And then we have that still watching dialog box, right? Do we want to show that are you watching? Just to check that we still have their attention, they're paying attention to the virtual stream. And the cool thing here is you get to control how often it happens, right? So do we want to do it every 5 minutes? Maybe we want to do it every 10. It's going to depend on how long your session is. As well, we give you the option to give them a join message. So maybe you want to warn them ahead of time, maybe they're muted, or maybe we're saving all questions till the end. This is where you can put that join message to warn them before they join the session. Hey, pay attention, read this. Now, I'm gonna move this back to on-site super quick, just so we can see some other features that a session has. And of course, I do have some custom fields here set up. So if you're gonna show any extra information, maybe it's learning objectives, or like we have here, credit types, or I've worked with a few wastewater events, so they separate between drinking water and wastewater. This is where we're gonna be saving that information on a per session basis. As well, we have the option of a quiz, like Chad told us. So are we going to give them a quiz to pass at the end of the session? You can also set the passing score, how many retakes they're allowed, or if you're allowing retakes, you can set this to 0. As well, how long do we have to wait between retakes? Do we want them to just go back to back, or do we want them to maybe give them some time to go back and watch the video again? Now there's no limit to questions here, which is really nice, so as many as you want. As well, you have two different types here, multiple choice and image choice. So maybe you want to show them a set of images, have them pick one. or maybe it's just your regular multiple choice. Now, as well, there's no limit to choices here, so we can go as simple or as expanded as we want, as long as we can tell the system which choice is correct. Now, this is multiple choice, so they only get to select one answer, so it's one correct answer per question within the quiz. Sometimes that's important on how you set up your sessions. So really quickly, we're just going to create a quick virtual session together. So we're just going to call this our virtual Tech Tuesday. And I'm just going to give it a random start and end here, because the goal is that I want to show you how to set up your virtual sessions after the fact. So we have our room, we have our start and end, and we have our name. We can go ahead and save with just that. That's the minimums. Now, as we get closer to the conference and maybe we've received a recording from a presenter, or maybe we have finally set up the Zoom room for that day, you have in your 3 dots option here a setup streaming button, as well as a preview streaming. So once you finish your setup and you go back and enter in that code that we were looking at, or you choose built in and you set it up this way, is it live or is it recorded? Now, once this is done, you can come in and you can preview the streaming and make sure that your Zoom link is working, your video did load correctly, there's no issues with sound or anything like that. And that is our basic session setup. Now, the other thing that we want to keep in mind are the settings that come into the sessions, right? So, and this ties more in with your session registration. So if we come into advanced options and we jump into our settings, there's a couple different places that we have different session settings available to you. Now, over here on this bottom middle, we do have a attendance session attendance settings, I'm sorry. And this is going to allow you to control those session requirements in mass. This also controls an early and late sign in, sign out window for these sessions. Now, this is more important at the end of your event, say if a bunch of presenters ended their sessions early and maybe those 75% requirements don't make sense anymore, we can come in here and lower this to 50 and then overwrite our attendance settings on existing settings. You want to toggle this and then save your changes. As well, we have the attendee registration settings. This is where you're going to control whether or not you are allowing online session registration and whether you are preventing attendees from registering to overlapping sessions. Now, this setting here, it's very important to understand how this works, because there's 2 toggles, on and off. When it's off, it's a warning. It's not going to stop the attendees from registering to overlapping sessions, but it will display your custom message and say, hey, you've signed up for overlapping sessions, make sure you double check your choices. When we turn this setting on, it becomes a hard stop. Hey, you signed up for overlapping sessions, go fix it before moving on. As well, we have the ability down here to allow attendees to edit their session registration. So after they finish registration, they've paid, they've been approved, are we allowing them to come in and change their minds? This is a newer setting, and we also have an area in the attendees section here under session registration transactions, where if you do allow this and they come in and make changes, all of those changes are recorded here in this menu option. With that, we also, going back to our main settings page, we have our streaming settings. This is for your virtual sessions, and this is going to control the access window before and after a session as to when they can access streaming. So can they sign in early? Can they sign out late? Or sorry, can they sign out late? Can they sign in late? So 10 minutes after the session, we're allowing users to access streaming still. And then as well, going into those custom fields, right? Because if we're going to capture this data, we have to title this data. So we do have 5 custom fields available for your sessions. As well, you can control as to whether these are only shown to admin. Do we, just as admin, want this data? Or is this going to be public to all users? Can attendees see this data attached to the sessions through the apps as well? And with that, that is virtually everything that you need to know about sessions. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Chad to take us out.
I just want to thank everyone for joining us for today's Tech Tuesday. This is the portion where we're going to go over any questions that you have. And I was just checking, and we do have a couple questions. So one is, how long can attendees view recordings? So I'm guessing it's talking about the virtual sessions. So the way that virtual events work under the Conference Tracker licensing is you have 90 days for your virtual access. So it'll allow attendees to watch recorded sessions for up to 90 days and still receive, credit for those sessions. Although you'll have access to all of your account data for as long as you like, call it our post expiration mode. But you can allow attendees to watch those sessions for up to 90 days from the start of your event. Let's see, there was another question.
I've got one question here. They ask, can we tell the difference between virtual and on-site attendance logs? And that is a great question that I didn't quite touch on. So when we were going over the creation of sessions, I mentioned how your session name needs to be unique. If you're going to be doing a sort of hybrid event, I would recommend that you have your on-site session separate from your virtual session. And you would name it just with the same title, just put the word virtual and a colon in front of it, right? This is going to allow you to track in the system later on how many people specifically came to the on-site and how many people specifically watched the live recording. Great question.
Great. So we do have another question. It's how do attendees receive session evaluations? So session evals in the Conference Tracker are actually through our attendee app or our attendee portal, and it's based upon attendance. So as soon as an attendee gets scanned into a session or scans themselves into a session, there will be a pending session evaluation that they can complete. They will get a push notification for that session evaluation. There's also a section within the app and their portal that they can go to and complete that eval anytime after the session. And I do see one last question is, can requirements be changed after attendance is taken? Yeah, so this is something that I know, Garrett, if you want to talk about it, you can. I know you help our clients, with their cleanup and things like that.
Absolutely, yes. And that is a very common question after an event, because like I said, sometimes your sessions end early and those settings don't really make sense anymore. You can, of course, edit them after the fact on an individual basis if you just want to step into that one session. But if you're going to change all of them in mass, if you jump into your settings, that's advanced options, settings, and then attendance. You have different controls there to control the requirement in the percentage, the minutes, whether or not you're requiring sign out. That one is specifically used a lot. Sometimes we notice in our cleanup meetings that a lot of people signed into this session, but almost nobody signed out. So we can use those to very quickly clean up attendance logs with just a toggle or two.
Great, and I believe that's all the questions that we have for today. So again, thank you all for joining today's Tech Tuesday. Just to, if you've never been to one of these Tech Tuesdays before, we're actually gonna have a survey for you after you leave the session. If you've never completed one before, or if you have some new critiques or some ideas on what you would like to see during a future Tech Tuesday, please complete that survey. We're kind of running out of ideas, so we're really looking to you to let us know what you would like us to talk about. And if you do have any additional questions, or you're using Conference Tracker and you have help, or you need help, you can always contact support at conftrack@engineerica.com. If you would like to schedule a demo, maybe you've never used Conference Tracker before, or maybe you want to know more about virtual events, hybrid events, the attendee app, anything, you can always email me directly at chadb@engineerica.com. So again, you're going to be redirected to a survey. Also, I'm going to be sending the recording probably tomorrow when it's available. So you should be receiving an email from me with the recording. So again, thank you all for coming, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Have a great day, everyone.